My name is Mia Rowe, and I am 34 years old. And 3 weeks ago, I discovered that the residential building I had just acquired on Crestwood Avenue was the building my family has been renting from for 11 years. I want to start there because that is the shape of the story from the outside. From the inside, the story starts 15 years earlier, on a Thursday evening in November, when I was 19 years old and my mother put 2 garbage bags and a backpack on the front porch of the house I had grown up in, and stood in the doorway with the specific expression of a woman who has made a decision and is not going to revisit it. The temperature was 41 degrees. I know because I had checked my phone while I was inside packing the bags and had thought, this is the wrong kind of weather for this. I had not known at the time that there was not a right kind of weather for being put out of your family's home at 19. There is no right kind. There is just the kind it is, and the bags on the porch, and the choice of what to do next. The reason was a community college design program. I had enrolled in the fall semester. I had paid the first semester fees myself from money I had been saving since I was 16, from 2 part-time jobs I had been working since I was legally old enough to be hired. I had not asked permission because I had not understood that permission was required. I was 19. The money was mine. The decision was mine. The future was mine. My family had a different understanding of whose future it was. They had an uncle with a warehouse that had a position available, and they had decided that position was my future, and they had not consulted me about the decision in the same way I had not consulted them about the college registration. And the difference between those two failures to consult was that mine ended with bags on a porch at 41 degrees. Before I tell you about Danielle's couch, please hit like and subscribe. Drop your city in the comments. I love knowing where you are when you listen to this. Now let me tell you what 3 months on a couch taught me about what a foundation actually is. Danielle was my best friend from high school, and she lived with her grandmother in a 2-bedroom apartment 15 minutes from Crestwood Avenue. And she answered the phone on the first ring when I called from the porch steps, and she said, "How long do you need?" I said, "I do not know yet." She said, "Okay." She said, "Come now." I slept on her grandmother's couch for 3 months. Miss Ella, Danielle's grandmother, was 74 years old and had this specific quality of a woman who has seen enough of life to not be surprised by any of it, and to be kind about most of it. She made me breakfast on the first morning without making a production of it. She asked me once what had happened, and I told her, and she said, "Baby, some people are not big enough for other people's dreams." She said, "The job is to get big enough that it does not matter." I went to class. I finished the semester. I got a second job, evenings and weekends at a copy shop, where the smell of toner became the specific smell of my early independence, and where I learned by watching the designers who came in to print their portfolios that the thing I was studying was something people actually built real careers from, and that those careers required exactly the combination of skills and discipline I had been building since I was 16, without knowing that was what I was building. I found a room to rent after 3 months, $60 a week from a woman on Maple Street who had a spare room and a preference for tenants who did not play loud music after 10. I did not play loud music at any hour. I studied. I worked. I saved. I finished the program 2 years later with the highest marks in my cohort and a portfolio that one of my instructors had described as the most commercially ready student work she had seen in 12 years of teaching. I did not call home when I graduated. I had called twice in the 2 years of the program. The first time, my mother had answered, and the conversation had lasted 4 minutes and ended with her saying things were still complicated. The second time, nobody had answered. I had stopped calling after the second time because I had understood that calling was not going to produce anything that the not calling was not already producing, and that the energy I was spending on calling was energy I needed for the work. I put the energy into the work. That was the whole strategy. Not a dramatic strategy, not a complex one, just the specific, committed decision to put the available energy into the work and let the work do what work does when you give it everything you have. The junior role was at a small commercial design firm in the city, 3 employees including me. The kind of firm that does good work without anyone outside the industry knowing it exists, and that teaches you more in 2 years than most people learn in 6, because the scale means you do everything, and the everything means you understand the whole picture rather than just your corner of it. I stayed for 3 years. I left for a senior role at a larger firm with 11 employees and a client list that included developers who were doing projects at a scale I had only seen in magazines during the copy shop years. I stayed there for 3 years also. I learned what I needed to learn, and I built the relationships I needed to build. And at 28, I had a client who said, "Mia, why are you doing this for someone else's firm?" The answer was that I had not yet been ready to do it for my own. At 28, I was ready. I opened the studio in a shared workspace in the design district with 2 clients I had brought with me and a name I had been thinking about for longer than I admitted to anyone. Rowe Studio. Simple. Mine. The name I had been given and had kept and had built something worthy of. The studio grew the way real things grow, which is slowly and then faster, and then at a pace that requires you to stop and reorganize your capacity before it outruns your ability to maintain the quality that produced the growth in the first place. I reorganized twice. I hired carefully, I turned down projects that were wrong for us, and accepted projects that were right, even when the right ones were smaller than the wrong ones. By 32, I had 12 employees and a client list that included commercial developers across 3 states. One of those developers was a man named Gerald Park, who owned residential and commercial properties in 4 cities, and who had become a client 2 years earlier when his previous design firm had delivered work that he had described to me as technically competent and completely soulless. I had told him I understood the complaint. We had worked together for 2 years, and then in September, he had come to me with a portfolio of properties he was looking to divest and had asked if I knew anyone in the acquisition space. I had said I might be interested in some of these myself. He had looked at me with the specific expression of a man recalibrating, and then he had said, "Let us talk about that." We talked. I looked at the portfolio. I identified 3 properties that fit the investment criteria I had been developing with my financial advisor for 2 years. One of them was a 12-unit residential building on Crestwood Avenue. I knew Crestwood Avenue. I had grown up a block and a half from Crestwood Avenue. I had not lived on the block for 15 years, and the address of the building had not registered as anything other than a good investment when I reviewed the portfolio. It was not until 3 weeks after the acquisition closed that I reviewed the tenant records. The property management company sent the tenant records as part of the standard handover package. I reviewed them on a Tuesday evening at my desk after everyone else had gone home, because reviewing tenant records is the kind of thing you do after hours, when the day is done and you have time to give them the attention they deserve. I went through each unit. Unit 1, long-term tenant, 11 years. Unit 2, new tenant, 7 months. Unit 3, vacant, renovation pending. Unit 4, I stopped at Unit 4. The name on the lease was Sandra Rowe, my mother's name. The address was Unit 4, 12 Crestwood Avenue. The lease had been in place for 11 years. The guarantor listed was a Marcus Rowe, my brother, 11 years younger than me. He would have been 12 when the lease was signed. He was 23 now. I sat at my desk and I looked at the name Sandra Rowe on a lease document for a building that I had just acquired, and I thought about 2 garbage bags and a backpack and 41 degrees and a porch and a woman standing in a doorway with the specific expression of a woman who has made a decision and is not going to revisit it. I sat with it for 2 days, not because I did not know what I was going to do, because what I was going to do required me to be in a specific state of mind to do it correctly, and that state of mind required 2 days to arrive at completely. I needed to not be doing it from the part of myself that was 19 years old on a porch. I needed to be doing it from the part of myself that was 34 and had built something real and was about to have the most honest conversation of my adult life. On Thursday, I called the property manager, a woman named Claire, who handled the day-to-day management of the building. I told her I needed to make contact with the tenant in Unit 4 directly regarding a personal matter, and that I would be handling that communication myself outside the standard management structure. She said, "Of course." I said, "I want to send a letter, not a form letter, a personal one. I want it delivered by hand." She said, "I can arrange that." I said, "Thank you." I wrote the letter that evening. It took me 4 drafts. The letter was 2 pages. I want to tell you what it said because the letter is the center of the ending, and the ending is the part that I want to be honest about, because honest is the only version of this story worth telling. The first page was informational. I introduced myself as the new owner of the property. I noted that I was aware she was the tenant in Unit 4 and that I understood this was an unexpected circumstance for both of us. I said that her tenancy was not at risk and that the terms of her existing lease would be honored for its full remaining duration. I said that I had no intention of using the change in ownership to alter her living situation in any punitive way, and that I wanted her to have that assurance in writing before anything else was said between us. The second page was personal. I said that I had not known the building was on Crestwood Avenue when I first reviewed the acquisition portfolio, and that I had not known she was a tenant there until I reviewed the records after the closing. I said that I was not sure what the right response to this circumstance was, and that I had spent 2 days thinking about it. I said that what I had decided was that the right response was honesty, and that honesty required me to say some things I had not said in 15 years. I said that I had not forgotten the Thursday in November. I said that I had not spent 15 years being angry about it because anger was not the fuel I had used. I said I had used the Thursday in November as information about what I was building and why, and that the building had produced a result I was proud of, and that I wanted her to know about it, not to make her feel bad, but because keeping her in the dark about it felt like a different kind of withholding from the one she had done to me, and I did not want to be that. I said, "I do not know what we are to each other now." I said, "I know what I want us to be, which is honest about what happened and open to whatever comes after the honesty." I said, "I am not your daughter the way a 19-year-old on a porch is a daughter. I am a 34-year-old woman with a firm and a property portfolio and a full life that was built without you and that I am proud of." I said, "I think there might be room for you in it if you are willing to show up for the version of me that exists now rather than the one you put on the porch." I said, "Call me when you are ready." I left my number. My mother called on a Saturday morning, 4 days after the letter was delivered. Her voice had the quality of a woman who has been sitting with something for 4 days and has not slept well and is ready to stop sitting with it. She said, "Mia." I said, "Hi, Mom." She said, "I read your letter 3 times." I said, "I know." She said, "I did not know you had built all of this." I said, "I know you did not." She said, "I should have." I said, "Yes." She said, "I am so sorry about the porch." She said it with the weight of 15 years in it. Not performance, not management, the genuine reckoning of a woman who has had 4 days to understand the full shape of what she did and what it cost and what it produced. I said, "I know you are." I said, "I believe that." She said, "What happens now?" I said, "I do not know yet." I said, "But I am willing to find out if you are." She said, "Yes." She said, "I am." We are finding out, slowly, the way things are built when the foundation had to be cleared before anything real could go on it. My brother Marcus called the following week. He had been 6 years old when I left. He barely knew me. He is 23 now, and he said, "Mia, I heard a lot of things about you growing up that I do not think were accurate." I said, "Probably not." He said, "I would like to know the accurate version." I said, "I would like that too." He came to the studio last month. He sat in the conference room and I walked him through 15 years in about 90 minutes, and he listened with the specific quality of a young man who is hearing a story about his family that he was not given access to, and understanding that the absence was a gap in his own history. The building on Crestwood Avenue is being renovated in the spring, not Unit 4. The common areas, new lobby, better lighting, the kind of upgrade that happens when someone who actually cares about the quality of the space takes ownership of it. I drove past the building last week. I sat in my car in front of it for a moment, the way I sometimes sit with things that are significant before I move on from them. A 12-unit building on the street I grew up on, bought with 15 years of work that started on a couch at 19. My mother's name on the lease in Unit 4, my name on the deed. I did not go in, I had a meeting to get to. I was back at work. That is the whole story. That is always the whole story. If they put your bags on the porch, build. Build until you own the porch. Build until the building, the address that was the end of something, becomes the beginning of something completely different and completely yours. That is my story. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop your city in the comments, hit subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.